Monster Hunter is a franchise I've enjoyed since I was a kid, but the vast majority of my time with Monster Hunter has been spent through the games. Watching my brother play Tri on the Wii was how I got my first taste of Monster Hunter, and most of my perception of Monster Hunter is through the lens of the video games. Monster Hunter is not, however, just the games, not anymore. Since its release in 2004, Monster Hunter has ballooned into a titan of a franchise, inspiring spin-offs, anime, manga, and even, unfortunately, a movie. There's just so much to Monster Hunter outside of the games that I've never really explored, and I was recently motivated to change that. Join me on my journey through the wonderful world of Monster Hunter adaptations as we delve into the different adaptations of Monster Hunter that have spawned from the success of the franchise. And, to spice things up a bit, in addition to discussing my thoughts on each piece of media, I'll also be ranking them on a tier list, so if you're also interested in delving deeper into the world of Monster Hunter, you'll have a better understanding of what's good and what's not. With all that out of the way, let's first jump into Monster Hunter Orage? Orage? How the
Orage.
Orage? French for storm. Okay. Monster Hunter Orage. I'm gonna call it Monster Hunter Orage, and you're gonna have to bear with me, alright? I'm not from fucking Lumiere. Monster Hunter Orage is a manga that ran from April 2008 to May of 2009, being written and illustrated by Hiro Mashima for Monthly Shonen Rival. This was the first Monster Hunter manga I read while embarking on this journey, and I'm glad it was the first one I read, because it's kinda not great. Monster Hunter Orage follows the story of Shiki, the main protagonist and a member of the Forbidden Hunters, a special organization created by the guild with the sole purpose of finding and hunting the legendary monster of myth, Mio-Garuna. Mio-Garuna's weapons are said to possess a unique and powerful wind element, which Shiki's dual blades happen to have. These dual blades were given to Shiki by his master, Goreli Jeskar, who entered and won the Forbidden Hunters tournament, giving Shiki his prize, the Forbidden Seal, to help him become a living legend. Shiki eventually teams up with Goreli's daughter, Airi, as well as the daughter of a renowned blacksmith, Sakuga, and they set out to track and hunt Mio-Garuna. From the start, especially with the talk of Mio-Garuna, I feel it's important to note that most online summaries of Monster Hunter Orage describe it as quote-unquote loosely based on Monster Hunter, and yeah, this manga takes a lot of creative liberties, as you'll soon see. The idea of Forbidden Hunters, despite being one of these creative liberties, I think is actually handled pretty well. The Forbidden Hunter seal allows hunters to roam free and hunt as they please in any hunting ground, so long as they report their hunts to the guild, a freedom the guild deemed necessary for finding Mio-Garuna. With this base concept in place, Orage takes its time to establish and expand upon the obvious poaching industry that would grow around this sort of freedom, and they're able to tie this premise into the main story a few times, which is pretty cool, but we'll circle back to that in a bit. My first and immediate complaint with Monster Hunter Orage is that our three main characters kinda suck. Shiki falls into what I'll describe as your standard shonen protagonist, being a normal dude gifted with some overpowered bullshit that whisks him away from any and all interesting character development. Shiki's an incredibly one-note protagonist with the very annoying character trait of wanting to fuck Airi's dad. Seriously, if you count all the words Shiki says throughout the entire manga, the word master probably accounts for like 50% of his dialogue. The bit wasn't that funny the first time it came up, and it really wasn't funny the many times after. Sakuga was somewhat interesting when she first joined the party, but quickly became a background character after her introduction. Shiki and Airi find Sakuga while looking for her father. According to Sakuga, he abandoned her and her mom, which then led Sakuga's mom to be killed by a monster called Darui Masu, leading Sakuga to spend her days forging weapons until she can kill it. Shiki and Airi team up with Sakuga to slay the Darui Masu, more on that fight later, and they find that Sakuga's dad died in its nest trying to get medicine for Sakuga's mom. Oh, her dad was good all along. That's sad and all, but the 3 sentences of summary I just gave you, that's it. That's all of Sakuga's character development for the next 12 fucking chapters. She joins Shiki and Airi on their quest to hunt Mio-Garuna because she wants to fulfill her dad's dream of making the strongest weapons she can, but there's nothing more that she does or learns, and she ends up becoming a one-note character like the rest of the protagonists, but at least she got something. I hope you can understand how frustrating it is to read through 14 chapters of a manga and see absolutely no growth in any of the characters you're following. Well, almost no growth. Airi is easily the best character in Orage, though if we're being honest, that's not a very high bar. Airi is introduced as this tough hunter who only hunts solo and abhors teaming up with people. Shiki FNAF jumpscares Airi on her quest because he wants teammates, and it's revealed that Airi is the son of Goreli Jeskar, Shiki's master. Now, Airi fucking hates Shiki and only agrees to team up with him because he's a forbidden hunter who believes that Mio-Garuna actually exists, just like Airi's dad believed. Airi is motivated to not only prove her father's stories true, but also to prove herself as a hunter, given how Airi's father devoted most of his attention to Shiki. As the story unfolds, we learn that Irie used to have teammates who all shared the common goal of becoming Forbidden Hunters. When the time to join the Forbidden Hunter trials came around, however, Irie learns that her teammates aren't motivated because they think Mio-Garuna exists, but because they want the freedom to hunt wherever they please, and when they realize they don't have enough money to enter the trials, they begin discussing plans of poaching and selling monster parts on the black market. Irie is opposed to this and tells the guild their plans, leading Irie and her teammates to be imprisoned, Irie's teammates rejecting her, and the guild barring Irie from ever becoming a Forbidden Hunter. This experience was deeply traumatic for Irie, who decided from then on that she wouldn't partner with anybody and would find Mio-Garuna on her own. Throughout the story, Irie slowly gets closer with Shiki and Sakuga and grows to accept them fully as teammates by the end, embracing the power of friendship. Wow! Don't get me wrong, this character arc isn't that amazing, and this whole cold-hearted character finds friends trope has been done much better elsewhere, but for what it is, it's pretty cute. And is also, unfortunately, the best that Monster Hunter Orage has to offer. Uh-oh. When it comes to a story, villains play an essential role as both a looming threat that the protagonists have to work around, as well as sources of conflict that promote character growth. Monster Hunter Orage has a number of antagonists, mostly taking the form of a monster like Mio-Garuna or Daryumasu, but there are two human antagonists as well. The first is introduced near the start of the manga, Kowloon. He's a talented gunlance main who has the hots for Irie and gets real upset that she's traveling with Shiki instead of him. In order to get in bed with Irie and get his revenge on Shiki, Kowloon decides that he'll become a Forbidden Hunter and slay Mio-Garuna, abandoning his team and beginning preparations by poaching monsters. Look, all the villainy in this manga is poaching related. I don't know what to tell you. Kowloon's plans, however, are interrupted by the edgiest motherfucker you've ever seen in your life. This is Shadow, who comes waltzing in with full death stench armor and this arc-veld ass hunter's whip. Ow, my eyes. Shadow, who had heard that Kowloon has a grudge against Shiki, requests Kowloon's help. Shadow tells Kowloon about the Starbreaker tournament, a tournament open only to Forbidden Hunters where people put their strongest weapons on the line and compete to slay as many monsters as possible. The winner of this tournament not only earns the weapons of all the losers, but they also get a map pointing to Mio-Garuna's location. Shadow admits that he wants Shiki's wind element dual blades and makes a deal with Kowloon, offering to help him become a Forbidden Hunter and win the Starbreaker tournament, so long as he's able to keep all the weapons. Kowloon agrees to this deal, setting up a pretty interesting character conflict that our protagonist is going to have to overcome. And then we don't hear from either Kowloon or Shadow for like 6 fucking chapters. Seriously, this is all set up in chapter 3, and we next see Kowloon in fucking chapter 9 when he becomes a Forbidden Hunter. That's like half the fucking manga. Now, I've also got some problems with how this whole plot point is set up. I think the concept of an antagonist vying for Shiki's overpowered fucking weapon makes sense, but I think they play Shadow's hand too blatantly here. Kowloon literally says, "I feel like you have ulterior motives," to which Shadow responds, "Don't sweat the details." Like, show, don't tell, guys. Shadow is obviously a sketchy character. Why is this openly shady character announcing that he's hiding something? And why is Kowloon openly admitting that he doesn't fully trust Shadow? Like, Jesus Christ. And then they disappear for half the fucking manga. Maybe we could have seen Kowloon investigating Shadow to better find out what his fucking deal is, or had Shadow do literally fucking anything at all to give us an idea of what he's really trying to do. The setup and payoff just suck. Eventually, the Starbreaker tournament comes and goes, but Shiki doesn't show, because Sakuga and Irie correctly point out, why would Forbidden Hunters even exist if there was just a map that led to Mio-Garuna and choose not to attend? So good on the manga for pointing this out and using it as a reason our protagonists avoid the tournament. Kowloon ends up winning the tournament and fulfilling his deal with Shadow, who expresses really wanting a wind element sword, and then fucking monologues at Kowloon about how he was so close to making a wind element weapon just for Shiki to have one, and how dare he steal his idea and years of effort and blah blah blah. This shit sucks. Like, guys, you had fucking 8 goddamn chapters to flesh out Shadow's motivations, and you did fuck all with it. Having him monologue his machinations isn't a solution to character development, it's a symptom of bad writing. Shadow eventually tells Kowloon that they should just straight up kill Shiki, and it turns out Kowloon figured out Shadow was the one who runs the Starbreaker tournament and had the guild on standby to arrest Shadow when he admitted to wanting to murder Shiki, and he goes to jail. This could have been cool. Kowloon could have had his time to shine, digging into Shadow's past and figuring this out, but instead, we just get one fucking scene where it's all told straight to us. After this, Kowloon heads for a place rumored to be where Mio-Garuna resides, stumbles into our protagonists, and joins them for the eventual showdown against Mio-Garuna, and it's just This transition from antagonist to protagonist feels super duper rushed, happening literally in the span of 1 chapter. Kowloon's character arc would be the equivalent of Zuko and Avatar siding with the Fire Nation for all 3 seasons, then joining Aang to stop Ozai in the second to last episode, and Aang and everyone's just kinda cool with it? Like, what? This motherfucker hated Shiki for 13 goddamn chapters, but through teamwork and the power of friendship is chill with him for the ending. This manga fucking sucks. Okay, so the human antagonists are a bust, but they're still the monsters as well, right? right? Monster Hunter Orage is loosely based on Monster Hunter, and they use a lot of creative liberty to create never-before-seen monsters for our protagonists to fight, like the aforementioned Mio-Garuna and Deru-Imasu. In fact, every major fight in this manga is between the protagonists and a non-canon monster, which is honestly really disappointing. The only mainline monster that gets a big fight is fucking Plesioth, who I wish wasn't canon. The action itself isn't anything spectacular, but there are some pretty hype moments, such as Shiki launching Airi towards Dario-Imasu's weak point in Chapter 2, only for Airi to return the favor for Shiki in their final fight against Mio-Garuna, showing how far Airi has come in trusting and relying on others. I feel like all these big fights, however, end far too quickly, and don't really give the impression that our heroes are struggling against them. The monster designs themselves aren't great either. They look a lot like how I imagine non-Frontier players see Frontier-exclusive monsters. They come off as pretty generic and don't really fit the Monster Hunter universe, even if some of their abilities are actually pretty cool, like Daru-Imasu's petrifying spit that eats away at a weapon's sharpness. The art in Monster Hunter Orage in general is also pretty inconsistent, with some monsters and weapons looking pretty cool, and then the art also tends to be pretty fan-servicey, which I guess is to be expected from a manga that released in the late 2000s, but I swear, a quarter of this manga is just the author looking for excuses to show off Airi and Sakuga's bodies so he can goon. The only redeeming factor this manga has, and the reason reading through it wasn't an absolute slog, was the comedy. Monster Hunter Orage is pretty fucking funny, and there are plenty of small jokes that either got a chuckle or full-on laugh out of me. Some of the jokes definitely show their age, like, yikes, this is definitely from the 2000s, huh? But there are plenty of out-of-pocket comments and reactions, especially from Shiki, that are pretty funny. The end of each chapter is also home to a small side series, A Hunter's Life, which takes us through the perspective of the artists working on Monster Hunter Orage as they illustrate their experiences balancing work with playing Monster Hunter. This isn't the only manga to do something like this, and most of the time I find these extra chapters to be pretty boring, but that's not the case here. The side chapters in Monster Hunter Orage are consistently entertaining, and I live for these little interactions that happen in the game. They're genuinely really funny. The jokes the artists make about their work relationships are also pretty funny. What the fuck? If the effort it took to make these side chapters as good as they were was put into the actual fucking manga, Monster Hunter Orage might have been pretty good, but here we are. Overall, Monster Hunter Orage is alright. The characters and story leave a lot to be desired, but it's pretty funny, and it's only 14 chapters long and can be fully read in about a day. The length might be part of the reason the pacing of the story is so fucking terrible, but it also means you don't have to deal with it for that long. If you don't have anything better to do, or you just want a sometimes funny manga you can read with your brain turned off, give it a try. For me, however, it's an overall painfully average experience and gets a C on the tier list. Following Orage, the next manga I chose to read is right next to Monster Hunter Orage, Monster Hunter Flash Hunter is the second widely popular manga set within the Monster Hunter universe. Monster Hunter Flash Hunter, written by Keiichi Akami and illustrated by Shin Yamamoto, received an English translation and publication through Viz Media in 2016. And guys, this shit is good. In fact, we're gonna do things a bit out of order because Flash Hunter gets an S on the tier list. I'm telling you this now because of all the Monster Hunter media that I went through, Monster Hunter Flash Hunter is by far the best, and if you're at all interested in reading a Monster Hunter manga, this is the one you should read. The English translation is available for free on archive.com, so you have no excuse not to go download and read it right now. I'm serious, I'll wait. This video's not going anywhere. The manga's 10 volumes long. You can finish it in like 2 days if you start now, alright? Alright. Now that you've read it, or can't be fucked to experience peak for yourself, let's jump into the plot. Monster Hunter Flash Hunter follows the protagonist Raiga, a rookie hunter who is motivated to begin his hunting career after being trained by his village's new resident hunter, Bexel, an immensely talented hunter who takes on difficult quests all by himself. One day, when Raiga is still young and being trained by Bexel, Bexel returns from a hunt different. Broken in some unknown way. Bexel resigns himself to his hut and nobody sees him for days until Agravios attacks the village. Raiga attempts to grab Bexel from his home for help, only to find that he's disappeared and abandoned the village, leaving only a blank piece of paper behind. It's here that a story begins, as Raiga vows to find answers on where Bexel went and why he abandoned the village, as well as to become a hunter strong enough to be recognized by him. Fast forward to after Raiga's grown up, and we cut to his hunting party disbanding, and Raiga needing new teammates, only for a local caravaneer to offer Raiga transit from Dundorma to Loc Lac, alongside another hunter named Kiers. Raiga and Kiers instantly do not get along, and because they enter Loc Lac with armor from monsters not native to the area, none of the other hunters know how skilled they are and are hesitant to team up with them, with the exception of Torsh, who into Raiga, dropping her notebook for Raiga to return to her later, where they invite her into the party. This is as good a time as any to say that the art and action scenes in Flash Hunter are fantastically done. Watching our party struggle against a Kuropeko and the Rathian that it calls in is so goddamn good. It perfectly captures the serious oh shit feeling you get when this happens to you for the first time playing the games. Unlike Orage, Flash Hunter takes great care and effort into exploring how scary and intimidating Monster Hunter can really be, significantly upping the stakes for our protagonists in every fight they find themselves in. On top of this, against the Rathian, the series explains its name, with Raiga having a flash, where he recognizes the Rathian's attack patterns and is able to weave in and out of attacks during the fight. On its surface, this moment's kinda cool, but contextualizing it with the games, this is essentially a dramatic depiction of what makes Monster Hunter so satisfying to play. Fully learning a monster's moveset and being able to complete hunts faster and faster is a core part of what makes the Monster Hunter gameplay loop so satisfying, and transforming this otherwise mundane, practice makes perfect mentality as this flash is really fucking cool, and is a sequence that's just begging to be animated. From the panels I'm showing, I'm sure you've also realized that the art is crisp. Flash Hunter follows the look of the games very closely, with a side panel from the illustrator noting how they used the game's smithy menu, where you can look at and rotate weapons and armor, as reference for the illustrations, and the effort they put into capturing the Monster Hunter look does not go unnoticed. Every hunter's weapons and armor, even those outside of our protagonists, are clearly defined and recognizable, and makes reading through Flash Hunter as a fan of the series that much more rewarding. Our protagonists are eventually able to defeat the Rathian with the last of their equipment, and realize that even if they don't get along all that well, they work great as a team and decide to stick together for the time being. Raiga and Kiers decide to return to Dundorma, whereas Torch will meet them at a later time after finishing business in Loc Lac, and we skip a few months forward in time. This opens up another small thing that Flash Hunter does with his characters, and that's actively changing the weapons and armor that our protagonists use. Orage had its moments where Shiki and Irie upgraded their weapons to be stronger, but the art struggled to reflect the growth that they'd been undergoing as hunters. In no small part due to Flash Hunter's significantly better artwork, we get to actively watch and see the equipment of our hunters improve along with their skill, and it provides a really cool show don't tell way of depicting their growth throughout the series, which I think is not only fantastically done, but again ties the premise and story of Flash Hunters more in line with player progression that's visible within the games. This is also the point in the story where Bexel reappears and is confirmed to be the rumored hunter Demon Dog, named so for his ability to relentlessly track and hunt any monster all by himself, and is portrayed as this edgelord longsword main in full Rathalos armor. Bexel is shown to be at Poke Village, a village Raiga and Kiers are asked by the Caravaneer to provide assistance to due to unprecedented monster activity, leading to another really cool scene where we get to see the progress Raiga and Kiers have made as teammates and their ability to work together and fend off two Blanganga with ease, and are even able to make jokes at each other's expense, showing their growth as friends too. Now, I want to be clear, most of the character growth that I'm discussing isn't done in some illustrious, never-before-seen way, but coming off of Orage, it's a breath of fresh air just to have the story present its characters in a way that shows off their personalities and growth, rather than having them monologue everything they're thinking and feeling when the author wants to convey that information to the audience. Eventually, when our party is in Poke Village's guild hub, Raiga and Bexel reunite, but Bexel basically ignores Raiga entirely and comes off as a serious asshole, only hunting monsters in Poke Village because he was promised something in return. Raiga, understandably, is quite shook by this and goes against Bexel's request that all large monster hunts be reserved for him by snatching a Keizu quest and essentially forcing Bexel to join their hunt so Raiga can prove himself. When Raiga fights the Keizu, however, the flash, the moment where everything clicks, it doesn't come, and Raiga gets fucking owned, only for Bexel to save the day and tell Raiga that the flash he's been experiencing, it's not special, and that he's not fit to be a hunter. After Bexel gets whatever he was after and sets out to leave Poke Village, Raiga confronts him one last time, asking him why he'd abandoned Poke Village when the cause for the monster's behavior is still unknown. Bexel dismisses this, saying that there are plenty of hunters, and that despite what Raiga believes, he's abandoned villages before. Bexel tells Raiga that he's surrounded by the stench of death, and that the way Raiga hunts puts everyone around him in danger, warning him again that he's unfit to be a hunter, effectively demonstrating how foreshadowing is a literary device. And Bexel leaves, and as Raiga sits in the cold, mountain air, he's confronted with the fact that the hunter he looked up to his entire life, his mentor, is not the man he once thought he was. I love this confrontation, and despite how fucking goddamn edgy Bexel is, like, what's with all these fucking edgy characters in these manga? His motivations, goals, and this thing he was looking for, it's super fucking intriguing, and really gets the reader wanting to learn more about Bexel's deal and what made him the way that he is. After Bexel's departure, we learn that a Tigrex is the monster that's been causing a ruckus, and that the resident hunter of Poke Village, Ivan, has gone missing fighting it, leading our protagonist to spring into action. Ivan is found badly injured, laying in the bed of an abandoned hut, and the decision is made that the Tigrex needs to be hunted before midnight to both allow for Torch to bring Ivan back to safety and to stop Tigrex from attacking the village at the same time. It's also here that we get some backstory about Kiers and the reason he often fucking hates Raiga, being that Raiga reminds Kiers a lot of his father, a hunter who is always eager to jump headfirst into danger if it meant protecting others. Kiers despises this mentality and thinks throwing your life away in a win for others is fucking stupid, and given that this mentality is what cost his father his life, Kiers has a point. We also learn that it was the very same Tigrex that's currently harassing Poke Village that killed Kiers' father, nicknamed Falcata, due to the crescent moon-shaped scar Kiers' father left on its face. I'll be honest, this is probably the weakest arc in the manga for me. I feel like Kiers' backstory was kind of rushed through, and this is the first time we learn about the fact that he only became a hunter to avenge his father's death and plans of retiring after this hunt's over. Anyway, after a long hunt, Kiers does a sick 360 no-scope off a cliff, leading both Kiers and the Tigrex to go missing, and after a week of search efforts turn up nothing, Torch makes the decision to head back to Raiga's home village to help him feel better, hoping that Kiers will eventually be found okay, but not before we get a flashback of Ivan's encounter with the Tigrex, where Ivan tells Torch that he was rescued by Bexel? Huh. With Kiers missing, Raiga and Torch decide to travel with another group of hunters that I've neglected to mention this entire time, Brad and Ile. These guys have been around since Raiga and Kiers were ambushed by Blinganga, with Brad and Ile serving as foils for Raiga and Kiers' mentalities when it comes to hunting. Brad is, on the surface, a lot like Kiers, who thinks that rushing into situations headfirst is stupid, whereas Ile, though she's more logical, is willing to jump into a bad situation if it's beneficial for the most people, and also wants to fuck Kiers. Race is the third member of the squad, who was injured while defending Poke Village from monsters, hence why Raiga, Taurus, Chile, and Brad all decide to team up and travel together, at least until Race recovers. When our protagonists arrive to Raiga's home village, however, there are a bunch of guys in full Gravios armor with gun lances who call themselves Waldbrand, a guild of hunters led by Ein and Tracker with the goal of making themselves legendary hunters by any means necessary, and are here following up on rumors of a Kirin sighting. To skip forward quite a bit, we reach a point where we see Ein and his squad fighting Kirin, and we see how Ein uses his other hunters essentially as tools and meat shields to give him a better edge against the Kirin. Oh no, he's bad, if the hairstyle and scar didn't give it away. Also, quick side note, first there's Kowloon, and now Ein. Why the fuck are all the bad guys gunlance mates? I feel a little attacked. This is another arc of the story that really isn't my favorite, if I'm being honest. There's this whole debacle where Ein's group is snatching all the available quests, and Raiga really wants to hunt Kirin to prove that he's capable as a hunter, so Ein's creepy-eyed gooner offers to give Raiga the quest in exchange for Torch, as she's a scholar in training and can give detailed information about the Kirin that Waldbrand thinks will give them an edge once Raiga inevitably fails the hunt, and Torch is like, nah, it's cool, you do you, Raiga. There's some implied romantic feelings that Torch feels towards Raiga, so sure, maybe love is involved in this, but like, you're just cool getting sold off like that? I don't know, man. It just feels like the author wanted to increase the stakes of the Kirin hunt, which, if I'm being honest, I don't even think was necessary. Kirin is an Elder Dragon, and Flash Hunter really hammers in how fucking terrifying an Elder Dragon can be. Throughout the fight, Ein and his men, as well as Raiga's squad, are barely able to keep up and don't land any solid hits on Kirin as it's all just fucking their shit up. Brad is basically left to fend for himself against Kirin as the rest of the party is forced to retreat, and there's real concern that Brad fucking died. Like, holy shit, this escalated really fast. Thankfully, Brad's a badass and lives, but everyone, our protagonists and Ein, fail to hunt the Kirin and it escapes, leaving everyone in shambles. I really love this depiction of the strength of Elder Dragons, as well as Torch's attempts to explain how his lightning powers work, which end up being wrong and getting people hurt, just because of how little information there actually is surrounding something like Kirin. I disliked the build-up for this arc, but the payoff against Kirin is phenomenal and serves as a real wake-up call for our protagonists, especially Raiga, that no, you aren't like Bexel, and you still have a long way to go. After this disaster of a hunt, the guild is like, wait a second, you're evil! And effectively disbands Waldbrand, leaving Ein as just another guy who ends up giving up on his chance of becoming a legendary hunter and freely gives information regarding the Kirin to another hunter who asks, but Bexel, why is he here? How intriguing. Anyway, Kiers is alive. Somehow. He commits to his plan of retirement and asks that Raiga and Torch not be informed that he's okay so he can just move on with his life, only for the guild member who saved his life to request that Kiers join a hunter named Muriel of the White Guard and her Palico Udon for one last hunt as repayment for the search and rescue operation. Kiers begrudgingly agrees, and Muriel, despite her confident and standoffish attitude, kind of sucks ass, and Kiers ends up showing off that he's the GOAT, and not only does Kiers find fulfillment in being a mentor, but he also learns that Muriel is from his home village, and was a young girl saved by his father on that fateful day when the Tigrex attacked. After a few years, Kyr's passion for hunting is fully reignited, and he makes the decision to seek out Raiga and rejoin his comrades. Oh, yeah, there's another time jump here. We skip forward 2 years following Kieran and Kyr's rescue from the snowy mountains, and we cut to Raiga, Torsh, Ilay, and Brad in Loc Lac discussing the rumors of a talented and good-looking gunner who Raiga thinks might be Kyr's. But he also overhears in the guild hall about how the demon dog repelled an elder dragon all by himself. Raiga believes he's gotten a lot stronger, but Bexel continues to grow faster than him. Eventually, Torsh mentions that rumors of a powerful Leviathan have been spreading, and fearing for her friend's safety, Raiga and crew all agree to head to Moga village to find out what's going on. Oh boy! This is definitely some heavy nostalgia hitting for me, but like, oh baby, look how clean my boy looks. This is where we begin to enter the final 2 arcs of Flash Hunter, and by far my favorite part of the entire manga. Being as responsible as you are, I know you already read the manga before watching this part of the video, but like, if you haven't read the manga and what I've been discussing at all is interesting to you, which I hope it is, given that you've made it this far, this is your last chance to avoid some big spoilers. Raiga, Torsh, Brad, and Ilay receive the quest for Lagiacrus, or wait, no. Lagiacrus. Fucking. They receive the quest for Lagiacrus and set out to begin fighting it. Pretty quickly, everyone becomes pretty badly injured, but Brad's fucking popping off and receives a flash of his own, weaving through the water to dodge most of Lagiacrus' attacks, but he's getting worn down. While Brad's holding his own, Raiga, Torsh, and Ilay retreat to the surface to recoup their strength, and Ilay looks down to see Brad's surface, a jolt of electricity, and then nothing. There's real concern that Brad fucking died. Wait a second. Unfortunately, Brad's gonna have to help himself because, uh-oh, you've just entered Area 8. Here he comes. It's your boy. And, as it just so happens, Kyr's was on a quest here yesterday hunting a Rathian and Rathalos, though the Rathalos got away, leading him to chase it down and stumble upon our injured hunters. In truth, this reunion seems a little forced. Like, what are the odds that Kyr's just happens to be here? But whatever. Kyr's ends up distracting the Rathalos from the squad, and with a flash bomb from Torsh, everyone is brought back to Moga village, injured and with Raiga out cold, but safe. Except for Brad. Wait, where is he? There's a real concern that Brad fucking died, but everyone's too injured to go and search for him, and 3 days pass before Raiga wakes up and is finally reunited with Kyr's. Raiga's pissed. Where the hell have you been? It's been 2 fucking years and we thought you were dead. This reunion doesn't go great, but given the distance between Moga village and Loc Lac, and with the quest to hunt the Lagiacrus being upgraded to an advanced quest for Lagiacrus and Rathalos, only Raiga, Kyr's, and Torsh are a high enough rank to take the quest on and search for Brad. And they head out on the quest, leaving Ilay at the village only to hope that they return triumphant. During this grueling fight, which again is illustrated fucking fantastically, Raiga catches a glimpse of Brad's greatsword, and the last deep wound it inflicted on the Lagiacrus, which Raiga takes advantage of to bring their hunt to a close. Peace is returned to Moga village, but at a steep cost, the stench of death lingering in the air. This makes Raiga realize that Bexel's different from himself, or from Kyr's, or from Brad. Bexel is gripped by an obsession that leaves him ready to die and eager to hunt only for himself in a world where hunters fight to protect. Raiga rejects this mentality and vows again to surpass Bexel and get him to realize the error of his ways, to which Kyr's and Torsh, of course, join in on. Then, we jump forwards in time again, by 5 years, where our protagonists are fucking decked out, the strongest they've ever been. They're also quite famous now, with posers taking their names and trying to profit off their image, which is just... this is weird. While in Loc Lac City, children from Moga village come running up to them, begging for help as a powerful elder dragon is threatening Moga village and is currently being held back by a single hunter. Bexel. Not much is known about Bexel's childhood, only that one day he washed ashore after a ship he was boarded sunk, leaving him as the only survivor. While peddling wares to make ends meet, Bexel bumps into hunters returning from a quest, and being an impressionable kid, thinks katanas are the coolest fucking thing ever and becomes a longsword main. Bexel quickly climbs the ranks as a hunter and shows immense talent early on. Bexel lives for these hunts, but prefers to work alone, his traumatic childhood closing him off from connecting with others. A random caravaneer takes interest in Bexel. Okay, like actually, who the fuck is this guy? And requests that Bexel travel to a small village in need of help, only to find that its resident hunter, growing old, needs a replacement and is hoping Bexel is the one. Bexel saves the village from some iodrome, and the villagers fucking love him and beg him to stay, though there's this one bitch-ass kid who doesn't think much of Bexel and thinks he'll be a better hunter than him one day. Bexel takes a liking to this kid and begins training him as a hunter, slowly building connections with Raiga and the villagers, and working alone less and less. One day, Bexel rushes out to save a wagon from a Gypsaros, and after being caught off guard by it playing dead, fucking noob, he's saved by the hunters accompanying the wagon and joins their squad, teaming up with others for the first time. Until that fateful day. Bexel and his team fail their hunt against an Uragon and begin sailing back to report, but they're optimistic that they'll be able to improve and succeed next time. But there's that smell again, and the fate that befell Bexel's family, the fate that left him alone, rears its head once again. Human strength cannot overcome this. How familiar, that smell. Bexel is no match for the Sea Deus and returns to Moga Village injured and bedridden. Bexel recognizes that Raiga has grown stronger, but he asks what Raiga has sacrificed to make it to where he is. Raiga doesn't understand, but spurred on by Bexel's words, Raiga makes the decision to scout for the Sea Deus on his own, without informing Kiers or Torsh, in a desperate attempt to prove to Bexel that he is strong and he can become a hunter. Only then, alone, deep underwater, face to face with beast insurmountable, does Raiga understand his sacrifice. He's arrogantly rushed into a fight against Rathian, despite the desires of Kiers and Torsh. Raiga's desire to protect Poke Village led to Kiers risking his life and jumping off a cliff, and Raiga's steadfast vow to surpass Bexel made him comfortable with selling Torsh to fucking Gunlance mains, and being forced to leave Brad, alone, deep underwater, to face certain death on his own. How familiar, that smell. My boy! Bexel sent Cha-Cha, equipped with the ancient mask, to rescue Raiga and return him to the surface. Kiers and Torsh are, understandably, pretty fucking pissed at Raiga and begin preparations to sail to Loc Lac to obtain and deliver supplies to both survive underwater and repair the underwater ballista and Dragonator for their upcoming fight, which are now desperately needed given that the Sea Deus, after being attacked twice, is a little pissed off. Raiga comes to and reflects on his mistakes, finally understanding what drove Bexel to obsession, but not before that familiar smell rears its head once again, and word comes to Moga Village that the ship Kiers and Torsh set out on to obtain supplies, as a result of the now agitated Sea Deus, has sunk. How familiar, that smell. The stench of death. Bexel attempts to stop Raiga. This is his fight. Raiga just pushes him down. Wearing the Rathalos armor that once inspired him, Raiga looks down on his former mentor and deems him too weak to hunt. This shit's so fucking good. While reading through Flash Hunter, I took a lot of notes about my thoughts on the story as it progressed, but from the end of Volume 8 onwards, I stopped taking notes. I was just fully engrossed in the story. There are some valid complaints you could make about this part of the story. Bexel's backstory of losing his friends and becoming edgy and upset because of it, it's not unique, and the one-panel explanation for Bexel's reasoning for leaving that one blank piece of paper at the start of the manga, it's not very satisfying. Kiers and Torsh surviving their ship sinking and joining Raiga and Bexel in their fight against Sea Deus, it's hype as fuck, but given the impact that their quote-unquote deaths had on Raiga, it somewhat cheapens the built-up theme of the consequences for seeking power, and dulls the metaphorical connection between Raiga and Bexel. Bexel being comically yoinked by Sea Deus at the end of the fight, it's kind of fucking stupid, especially when he just reappears in the epilogue alongside... Wait, is that fucking Shadow? Bexel, no, get out of there! But, at this point, making it this far with these characters and seeing the sick fucking art in the sick fucking fight, and Bexel finally seeing a flash, not of the monster, but of the friends he made along the way. It's honestly really fucking cool. I literally didn't even care that they did the cheesiest fucking thing right at the end. These final few volumes were that good. Monster Hunter Flash Hunter gets an S on the tier list. I think the story beats, character arcs, heavy themes, art, and action is all fantastic. Even the comedy, I barely got to talk about the comedy. It's not consistently funny, but the jokes they make land, they're good. To step back from all of this for a bit, it's no fucking surprise that I like Monster Hunter, and there were definitely plenty of moments in Flash Hunter that I liked purely because it was Monster Hunter related. I'm very, very biased in that regard. However, looking at Monster Hunter Flash Hunter as objectively as possible and as a standalone manga, I still believe it does a really good job in telling the story it wants to tell and getting the reader invested in the characters and the journey they find themselves on. As I've alluded to multiple times, there's really nothing in Flash Hunter that's groundbreaking, and I'm pretty sure there are plenty of examples of similar story beats and structures being done much better in other manga, and I could see others overall giving Flash Hunter like a B or an A. But I'm not looking at this objectively. I'm looking at this as the best Monster Hunter manga money can buy, and I confidently and easily give it that coveted S tier ranking and my recommendation for fans of the Monster Hunter franchise. Here it is, boys, our first proper Monster Hunter anime. Monster Hunter Stories Ride On, directed by Hitsuru Hongo for David Production and airing from October 2016 to April 2018, is an anime adaptation of the spin-off game Monster Hunter Stories. Around the time Monster Hunter Stories 2 came out, I remember seeing the first episode of Ride On was released for free on YouTube, so I gave it a watch, and I wasn't impressed, to say the least. But, going into making this video, I knew I wanted to actually give the full anime a shot, as despite some of the CG looking, you know, bad animation and CG, though disappointing, doesn't impact the quality of a show's writing, pacing, or characters, which are elements I personally find more interesting to discuss anyway, so we'll mostly put the animation aside. Also, before we jump into talking about the anime, I have a confession to make. I've never played Monster Hunter Stories. I played the sequel, and I really liked it, but I've never played the first. Prior to jumping into the anime, I'd heard that it essentially follows the plot of the first game, but I learned after watching it that Ride On is also home to an anime-exclusive arc, but I'm getting ahead of myself. If nothing else, my not having played the game should make for an interesting discussion, as I can more easily separate the show from the game and see how this adaptation stands on its own. Monster Hunter Stories Ride On follows the story of our protagonist Loot, along with his friends Cheval, Lilia, Millie, Hyoro, and the worst fucking character ever made. They've all grown up in Hakum Village, an isolated village of riders, and are the next generation of riders to begin training and hatching monsters of their own. The show starts off pretty good, with Loot, Cheval, and Lilia entering the Forbidden Land to look for an egg. Wait, Forbidden Land? Oh no! The gang eventually stumbles upon a Rathalos egg, who hatches into Ratha, a healthy monstie to accompany Loot. Interestingly enough, Loot was able to hatch this monstie without yet having a kinship stone. How intriguing. I wonder if that's important. They fight the fucking Arzuros and return to Hakum, but not before the episode ends with some spooky looking grass, a sign of ill tidings. For a first episode, it's not bad. It sets up our cast of characters pretty well and gives viewers unfamiliar with Monster Hunter Stories a pretty solid understanding of the whole shtick of riders. Unfortunately for you, if you were intrigued enough by this first episode to continue watching, the show doesn't do fucking anything for another 8 goddamn episodes. Seriously, episodes 2 through 9 are fucking awful. I'm very, very tempted to consider these episodes filler because of how minimal their impact on the overall story is, but some of the episodes, at the very least, begin setting up some breadcrumbs of interesting characters and conflicts, like Roberto the Hunter and how riders have to hide their existence from hunters, or Ramon of the Royal Scriveners, who Lilia immediately wants to fuck. This is very important for the plot, I promise. The rest of the episodes, however, are just really fucking boring, such as the Monstie races, or Cheval making Loot a souffle, or two of the other worst fucking characters in the show getting an entire episode dedicated to them, or Dan, the guy responsible for training rookie hunters, being attacked by some bugs. It's one thing to have filler episodes in an anime. Nobody really likes them, but they're usually just one and done deals sprinkled between or during large story arcs, but to have 8 vapid, pointless episodes back to back at the very start of your anime, it's fucking baffling to me. Almost immediately, I assumed I would hate this anime, and it was a fucking slog to get through these first few episodes. This is also as good a time as any to mention that the main cast of characters are not amazing, at least not yet. This anime loves doing stupid and annoying one-note character tropes, like Lilia's combined drinks being awful, but she's blissfully ignorant of the fact, or Loot wholeheartedly believing in the power of kinship, as any standard shonen protagonist is required to do, to Naviru being himself. These traits make a lot of these characters pretty obnoxious a lot of the time, and though these traits get toned down later into the anime, they never really go away. Okay, I know I'm being really negative right now, and that's because these first 9 episodes fucking deserve it, but on episode 10, thankfully, the story starts picking up and things get interesting. By this point in the story, the black grass around Hakum Village has been mentioned like 3 times or so, but we've also gotten to look at this fucked up Nargacuga, a monster inflicted with something known as the Black Blight, and it's slowly encroaching on the forest surrounding Hakum Village. We also see that Cheval happened upon a Rathian egg and decides to hide it in his house to surprise Loot once he eventually gets it hatched. In their search for answers, our characters return to the shrine of the Forbidden Land where Loot found Ratha, and the chief informs them that the shrine is dedicated to Redden, a legendary hunter who saved the world from the Black Blight. Suddenly, Arzuros! Loot kicks its ass, and the gang sees that it was injured from a blighted Nargacuga, the same monster that killed Loot's parents when he was only a child, leading Loot to declare that he will be a rider strong enough to save people from disaster when needed. At last, some semblance of character motivation. Side note, the action in this Arzuros fight isn't spectacular, but listen to this. You hear that music? It's actually pretty fucking good. I had initially thought that the anime, similar to how it uses the 3D models and kinship attack animations from the games, likely used music from the game as well, but no, the entire anime has its own OST by Masaru Yokoyama. Some of the songs get a bit repetitive after a while when they're used back to back in some episodes, but the music in general is pretty solid and adds a lot to some of the encounters we'll see down the line. Anyway, Nargacuga attacks! Our gang develops a plan to stop the Nargacuga by oh my god, that's fucking brutal. It's fucking oh, never mind. Nargacuga goes on a rampage in the village as Lute chases it down to stop it. Cheval's mom is like, oh wait, I need to protect the Rathian egg, and runs away from the evacuation site back into the village to grab it, only for Nargacuga to leap onto the house she's in and demolish it, killing Cheval's mom in the process. Cheval is not okay, and desperate for strength and revenge, hatches this nubile Rathian and sends it into combat. Our party finds out that the Black Blight is being spread from corrupted kinship ore that needs to be purified, so they all stand and fight this Nargacuga to remove the blight. This is also the first scene where we get to see Ratha's kinship attack, which Naviru fucking immediately ruins by just name-dropping the attack from the game. What, am I supposed to clap like a fucking seal? Like, I get that reference. It's actually a pretty hype moment, but I wish the anime was just allowed to cook here for a second. At the end of the fight, Ratha fucking dies, and I feel like Lute gets over this really fast, actually, and is making jokes like, guess I'll run back to the village. Losing Ratha comes up a bit later, but like, I don't know, he's your first Monstie. I guess I was expecting more of an emotional reaction here. Upon returning to Hakum Village, our riders undergo the purification ritual, cementing them as full-fledged riders, and they set out on their quest to the hunter capital of Gildegron to learn more about the Blight and how to stop it. Overall, given the horrible fucking first 9 episodes, I actually quite enjoyed the Blighted Nargacuga arc, and I feel like it did a really good job of establishing character motivation and drive, as well as implementing some much needed stakes to the story, and finally had me interested to see where the story would go from here. Following the Nargacuga arc, the story takes a more laid-back and slow approach, following our protagonists as they journey around, looking for information about kinship ore, stumbling into other important characters like another writer named Avinia, the second greatest character in the show, the Riddle Master, and Debly, who's voiced by Okamoto Nobuhiko, who I'm incapable of not hearing as Bakugo. Debly is another example of a character that has a one-note running gag, where our characters constantly mispronounce his name and Debly gets real upset every time. Multiple times per episode. I wish the anime did less of this. Anyway, given that the show is setting up for its next big arc, a lot of these episodes follow a pretty formulaic process of our protagonist looking around, discovering someone or something, and then defeating a large monster at the end of the episode. It's pretty inoffensive, but it's not groundbreaking television either. I also feel obligated to mention that in episode 20 specifically, Naviru is like actually a decent character. It's a largely Naviru focused episode, and I was shocked that he wasn't fucking annoying or unbearable for the vast majority of it, which was a nice surprise. One thing that I didn't like was our protagonist riding monsters in Gildegron. You know, the hunter capital. There was an entire episode early on about how writers live in seclusion and hunters can't know they exist, but it seems like everyone in Gildegron is just chill with riders. I feel like they wanted to build up to some greater conflict, but just completely dropped this plot point, and the only time it ever comes up again is, and I'm being dead fucking serious, the last goddamn episode of the anime, where the chiefs of Hakum and Gildegron are like, wow, I guess hunters and riders can get along after all. You don't get to do this payoff without showing a single situation where they didn't get along. It makes no sense. The reason for these formulaic episodes and the plot point they're building up to is the gradual edification of Cheval, who's quite bloodthirsty for monsters and thinks that leaving monsters alive, blighted or not, is a threat to the humans who live around them. Lute doesn't subscribe to this mindset and recognizes that monsters attack for a reason and can be managed peacefully. Also, and I know I said I wouldn't really be focusing on it, but I do want to say that the animation, specifically the CG, looks a lot better the later you get into the show. It obviously, has its moments, but the show can look really good when it wants to. Oh yeah, that static and lifeless figure, that's Dr. Mandelger. He's a recurring antagonist who's dead set on mechanizing and controlling monsters without the use of kinship, and is hinted to have some relation with Naviru. He'll be important later. Eventually, by episode 25, the schism between Lute and Cheval reaches a boiling point, and Cheval opens up and expresses that he blames Lute for the death of his parents, citing that it was Lute's plan to defeat Nargacuga that led to it running into the village and killing his mom, and that it was because Cheval's dad was helping Lute's dad that he died as well. I actually really like Cheval's character here, and he's by far the most interesting character due to his frame of mind and how he interprets the events of the story. If you think about it, it's pretty clear that Cheval is like objectively wrong, but given his trauma, this mindset works for me. Lute even confirms and reinforces Cheval's reasoning, as he's always blamed himself for not being stronger when it mattered and blames himself for Cheval's mom dying as well. Though it's not groundbreaking, I feel like Lute and Cheval splitting off here makes a lot of sense given what they've gone through, with their conflict not only being meaningful but thematically appropriate as well. Cheval decides that that his mission's going to be to stop the Black Blight in his own way, by slaying every blighted monster he comes across, whereas Lute will follow the mural of Redden and seek out the legendary egg said to hold the dragon that Redden used to end the Blight in his time. To this effect, Millie and Hiro choose to side with Cheval, whereas Lilia and Naviru side with Lute, and our protagonists are officially split into two factions. On his quest to find the egg, Lute heads to Dovin Volcano, where he eventually stumbles into the lab of Dr. Manelger, where it's revealed that, oh no, there's not just one Naviru, there's fucking 6 of them. These are the Numbers, a group of felines who've been imbued with the abilities of different monsters. Naviru 2 is a number 5 specifically, and we learn that Naviru's been infused with the powers of a Zinogre, hence his electric abilities. The numbers themselves are pretty whatever, with the exception of Floof, who's the best character in the entire goddamn show, and I now have an unhealthy amount of live Floof reactions in my gallery. They're so fucking cute. What I absolutely hate about the numbers is this goddamn fucking numbers cutscene. It's like 20 seconds long, and they play it 3 times in the episode where they're all introduced. Like, did you really need to pad the runtime of the episode that much? Jesus Christ. Anyway, Lute and the numbers put a stop to Dr. Manelger and purify the kinship stone, but uh-oh, Ratha's getting blighted, and Cheval shows up and decides that Ratha has to die now. You get a pretty mid-fight scene between Lute and Cheval, as well as between Millie and Hiro and some of the Hakum Village riders, and Cheval's like, I'll be back. I don't know. It's the first time we got to see riders fight each other, so it was kind of hyped for that reason alone, and it's always interesting when Cheval's on screen, but, and I'm sorry, it's moments like these where I do wish the animation was just a bit better. I feel like this could have been a pretty cool and dynamic fight otherwise. After this, I don't have a lot to say here. The anime continues its formulaic episode structure of Lute running around and looking for kinship stones to purify. They first travel to Nobaka Island to visit the feline village of Quapni, where, god damn it, not again. They find the kinship stone, stop a monster, yada yada. Again, I know I said I wouldn't harp on the animation too much, but I want to mention that all of these monster fights end in the exact same way with the exact same kinship attack animation, and it just doesn't always feel great. I know the kinship attack animations are cool, and you gotta get your money worth with those, but I wish the action scenes were at least a little less formulaic. It makes them really uninteresting to engage with, especially when this happens at the end of almost every episode. After his time in Quapni Village, Luke continues the hunt for the white dragon egg and finds it, only for Dr. Manelger to swipe in and snatch it, with the goal of giving it to Cheval, who's more willing to cooperate with Dr. Manelger's research. Unfortunately, Cheval's too edgy and lacks the kinship power to actually hatch the egg, so Dr. Manelger works to upgrade the kinship stone in order to hatch it anyway. To get the kinship stone to hatch the egg, Dr. Manelger heads to Hakum Village to mine the pure stone that feeds the waters used in the purification rituals our protagonist completed when they first left the village, and uh-oh, Doctor's evil, so it all gets blighted instantly. Lute stops it, Cheval shows up, and then we get episode 38. Episode 38 is the best episode of the anime by far, with Cheval again blaming Lute for the death of his mom and demanding that they fight, so Cheval can prove that killing monsters is the correct way of managing the blight. Lute and Ratha refuse to fight, and Cheval's Rathian refuse to obey his commands. In his anger, Cheval deadass busts out his sword and is about to kill his own Rathian for disobeying him before the village chief steps in and reminds Cheval, correctly, that his mom died because she was protecting that egg. This leads Cheval to simply abandon his Rathian and walk away from the chief and Lute. This episode's fantastic, and I really liked this final explosion between Lute and Cheval. And when Cheval busted out his sword, I deadass straightened up in my chair like, oh, hold up. I think the darker themes, character confrontation, and story implications of episode 38 are top notch and had me absolutely hooked. I realize as I'm writing this, and I know I mentioned it earlier, that the anime largely follows the story of the game. This exact confrontation probably happens in the game as well, but as somebody who hasn't played Monster Hunter stories, I think the adaptation of this conflict is visceral and meaningful, and got me very interested in how Cheval's character will continue to develop moving forwards, especially with the chief's comment regarding the Rathian egg. Yes, Cheval blames Lute for his mother's death, and Lute somewhat agrees with this, but his mom only ran back to the house in the first place because it was Cheval who snuck the Rathian egg home. Maybe Cheval will begin to reflect on this reality a bit more as well. We follow this up with another few great episodes, with Lute going to the Tower of Illusion alongside Avinia to reaffirm his faith in the power of kinship, which results in Lute being forced to relive the Nargacuga attack on Hakum over and over until he realizes that simply being strong isn't good enough, and that it's through working together, through kinship, that the outcome can change. The power of friendship! This strengthened kinship also allows Lute to unlock the finalized version of his kinship attack with Ratha, which... Naviru also fucking ruins, whatever. At least the animation is pretty sick. Cutting back to Cheval, we see him continuing to work with Dr. Manalgar, who's working on a mecha kinship stone in order to hatch the legendary dragon egg. We also see Cheval with his new monstie, Nargacuga, because Cheval recently learned what exposure therapy is on TikTok and thinks this is a great idea. We also see Cheval pretty quickly abandon Nargacuga as well after it refuses to obey his command to hunt down a non-blighted monster. Cheval's edginess has officially reached a critical mass, and Millie and Hiro are like, wait, this shit sucks, we're out of here, and they leave Cheval as well. There are some pretty uneventful episodes here with Dr. Manalgar's assistant, Itsy Bits, mixing up the fucking legendary dragon egg capable of saving the world with fakes and god damn it, not again. Eventually, the doctor just fucking leaves with the egg, so I don't know what the point of that was. Fucking why? I'm so sick of this fucking cutscene. Somehow, some way, they managed to make characters far, far worse than Naviru. I hate all of them. Except you, Floof. You stay. Anyway, at this point, Lute also meets up with Millie and Hiro following their leave from Cheval, and then we progress as usual, looking for blighted kinship ore. Lute finds a Kirin defending a kinship ore. He communicates with the Kirin after it possesses Naviru? What the fuck? And then they move on, but uh-oh, Cheval hatched the legendary egg and it's, something? I don't know. I don't really fuck with this monster design. It looks a little whack to me, but whatever. Cheval and Dr. Manalgar head off to commit some crimes. At this point as well, Lute, Millie, Hiro, Lilia, Roberto, and Simone all head to Mount Celion, where the last unpurified kinship ore is, and it just so happens that Cheval and the Doctor are headed there as well, setting up the final confrontation. The setup to this final confrontation really feels like it was inspired by a video game, but I mean that in a good way, sort of. By this point in the story, the anime's done a pretty good job of splitting its episodes between Lute and Cheval, and it finally feels like all the pieces in both of their stories are falling into place and have been building towards a boiling point on Mount Celion, which got me pretty hyped for what was going to happen. It doesn't feel natural, per se, and I think the timing of these events coinciding so close can come off as a little too convenient, but I think it works well enough for moving the plot forwards. At the summit of Mount Celion, Lute and Cheval are reunited, with Lute and Ratha standing against Yugi and his Blue Eyes White Dragon. They fight for a bit, and then, after Cheval's dragon stops listening to his command, it gets blighted and transforms into the Black Dread, the fated being responsible for spreading the blight in the first place. Cheval gets fucking owned by his own monster, but is saved last minute by his Rathian, leading Cheval to recognize that kinship is real. Ugh. Look, it's a nice emotional beat, I get it, but Cheval was such an interesting character. I feel like being saved by his Rathian and then suddenly flipping 180 and believing in kinship it just doesn't feel great. If the anime was willing to spend the time slowly building up to Cheval's edgy arc, then they should have spent more time handling this transition as well. It ends up feeling quite rushed as a result. Cheval gets some more time to shine later on, so it's not like the consequences of this arc go away completely, but it still felt quite sudden to me. Anyway, since he's good again, Cheval decides to help Lute stop the Black Dread. While Lute's protecting Ratha from being blighted, Cheval distracts the Black Dread, and once Ratha is himself again, Lute joins the fight, and during his kinship attack, goes fucking Mach 10 and becomes the Dragon of Light, slaying the Black Dread and ending the Black Blight, just like Redden did many years ago, saving the world as we know it. So that's it. Overall, I feel like Monster Hunter Story's right on, though a little bumpy at the start, actually swung around and what? What do you mean this isn't the finale? Check the episode. This is episode 48? How the fuck are there 27 more episodes left? Before this episode even ends, we learn that, for some reason, Avinia has been captured by some evil gang known as the Ebon Riders, and now she needs to be rescued. Okay, a couple of things. First off, I thought this quote-unquote finale was actually pretty solid. I thought the final fight against the Black Dread was pretty good. The music, the animation, the conclusion of the story arc, it all works pretty okay. What I don't like is that they, almost immediately, begin jumping into the next plot point without giving our characters a second to breathe within arcs. Not even time to reconcile with everything that's just happened, with everything that Cheval did. I don't like it. This wouldn't be nearly as frustrating to me if the anime didn't start off with 9 episodes of filler that could have been used at a time like this to give our characters time to smoothly transition into the next arc. Instead, they wasted all the filler at the start, and now they need to shoehorn a new plot point into the same episode that the main arc of the story you've been following this entire time comes to a close. The pacing here is just, it's not good. Anyway, who are the Ebon Riders? If you've played Monster Hunter Stories, this probably doesn't ring a bell, and that's because this is an anime original story arc. I said I didn't play Monster Hunter Stories, but following this part of the show, I had a hunch that this wasn't something that happened in the game, and eventually looked it up to confirm this, but I'll touch on why I had this hunch in a bit. Hey, it's future me editing this right now. I wanted to quickly point out that I was doing a little bit more research about this after I recorded this, and I found out that the Ebon Riders actually are in the games. Specifically, the Japanese version of Monster Hunter Stories had an extra update, Update 1.3, that added the Ebon Riders into the game as post-game content that you could go and fight. In a strange twist, however, this update came out after the anime, so for all intents and purposes, it's still an anime original arc that the games ended up canonizing. It's kind of strange. I figured I'd mention this here because I felt like I'd get a million comments if I didn't, so they might ring a bell for you, but anyway, back to the video. Regardless, the Ebon Riders are a spooky organization of riders that operate under the leadership of Master Anvis. There are 4 high-ranking riders in their squad, being Gale, Wrath, Mad, and Shadow. Master Anvis has been sending his Ebon Riders out into the world to attack riders and steal their kinship stones for some unknown reason, and it's brought to the viewer's attention relatively early that they're specifically after Lut's kinship stone, since Lut, as the rider who stopped the Black Blight, has an immensely powerful kinship stone that Master Anvis needs his hands on, setting up the conflict for the rest of the anime. We also learn that the reason Avinia was kidnapped has to do with a secret kept by Avinia's village, though we have no idea what that means yet. As Gale heads out to Akum village to snag Lut's kinship stone, we cut to Nakiri, a junior rider, going through his first steps of training. You know he'll be important later because it gets a 3D model. Suddenly, Gale appears! Gale meets Lut at Akum village on a silver Rathalos to do combat and... oh shit. He's got different Monsty genes. I actually really like this being a big plot point for this part of the story. It melts together a legitimately cool mechanic from the game, with you being able to unlock and use the abilities of different monsters as part of the reason the Ebon Riders are so dangerous, and Gale proves very quickly to be dangerous. After Lut gets his ass beat and flees back to the village for help, the chief of Hakum quickly tells our protagonist that the rite of channeling is what allows his Monsty to use different abilities, and pushes our protagonist to head to the Riddle Master to learn more. In attempting to get to the Riddle Master, Gale drops in and fucking demolishes every rider who stands in his way, taking the kinship stones of every rider in Akum outside of our protagonists. This is a really cool start to the story arc and sets the Ebon Riders up as a legitimately formidable force that our protagonists are gonna have to somehow manage. I like it. It also helps that Gale's a pretty likable character, though his feline nuts is... I don't like nuts. After this harrowing introduction, our protagonists decide to split up and get strong enough to stop the Ebon Riders, with Lut going to learn more about the rite of channeling, Cheval looking for clues on Avinia's whereabouts, and Millie and Hero searching for stronger monsties. Millie and Hero get a Seregios and Zenogre respectively, and they immediately have to put them into action when Nakiri gets jumped by Mad, another elite Ebon Rider who... wow, I don't like this guy either. I neglected to mention this during the fight with Gale, but we see Mad using a technique that Gale also used, something called Sync Ride, where the Ebon Rider syncs with their Monstie, making them faster and stronger. I'll be honest, I can't fucking remember if they actually explain what this is, and they don't really call it out by name after we're introduced to each of the main Ebon Riders, so just know that they're stronger both because of the rite of channeling and this Sync Ride. With Millie and Hero distracting Mad, Nakiri chucks some dung bombs at Mad, who feels defiled and runs away. He's kind of a bitch. Following this, we cut back to Lut, who's arrived at the Riddle Master, who explains the rite of channeling and non-consensually gives Naviru a new power. From a Kongalala. Oh god. The next couple of episodes basically follow this formula as well, cutting to each of our protagonists on their own individual quests to find information that will be helpful to rescue Avinia, and stumbling upon and having to fight the different Ebon Riders, with Cheval being pitted up against Shadow, and Nakiri, again, being pitted against Wrath. After being spared by Shadow, Cheval is like, damn, fuck looking for clues, I want this rite of channeling too, and heads to the Riddle Master, whereas Nakiri, Millie, and Hero are able to fend off Wrath because he got hungry. Okay, maybe the Ebon Riders aren't that threatening after all. After we're formally introduced to all the members of the Ebon Riders, the anime interrupts our story with some filler. The filler episodes here are what tipped me off into thinking this was an anime original story arc, as throughout the entire Black Blight arc, outside of the first 9 episodes, there wasn't a single episode of filler, likely because the anime was able to just follow the plot of the story as it was told in the game. With the Ebon Riders, however, filler content's used more liberally throughout the arc, and all these filler episodes are pretty... whatever. The first one here involves Debly wanting the rite of channeling to power up his quote-unquote Monstie, Great Poogie, so he can rescue Avinia, and he gets into some wacky situations. Anyway, Lut, after receiving a channeling stone from the Riddle Master, decides to head to the forest where he met Kieran to receive its power for Ratha, and Kieran's all like, you're gonna have to throw hands for this shit, and Lut's like, no, and Kieran's all like, damn, respect, here you go fam, and now Ratha has lightning powers. Yay! Cheval, too, receives power, but he gets it from a Barioth seen protecting over Avinia's abandoned and destroyed village, so his Rathian has ice powers now. Side note here, something I neglected to mention earlier is that, like how Lut has Naviru with him, the rest of the numbers decided to split up and join each of our protagonists as their own navigators, and it's kinda cute that the elemental powers of the numbers correspond with the rite of channeling powers that our protagonists get, seen with Ratha having lightning powers that match Naviru's, and Cheval having ice powers that match Cryo's. We also cut back to Avinia attempting to break out of jail, only to to be caught and stopped by Gale immediately. When Avinia returns to her cell, however, she hears Gale humming something that sounds familiar. Wow, I wonder what the twist is going to be here, huh? We then get a few more episodes of filler, following Lily and the Scrivener's quest for information about the Ebon Riders and Avinia's location, as well as episode 58, Naviru's Great Fart Plan. We're just really scraping the bottom of the fucking barrel here, aren't we? This is the worst episode of the entire anime. I actually lost the will to live after sitting through this. This episode is centered around Naviru and a small feline village we saw during the Black Blight arc when Lute was looking for kinship ore around Gildegaron. As a result of Lute stopping the Black Blight, in accordance with the legend of Redden, Naviru is treated as the new legendary feline companion and gets revered by the village, who all cheer and clap when Naviru does some stupid fucking repetitive, awful, annoying character bit. God fucking damn it. Thanks to Naviru's stupid fucking Kongalala fart powers, he's able to save the day by inflating himself on some special donut shrooms and shitting all over a royal Ludra who attacked the village. Oh my god. This episode feels like they managed to condense everything I can't stand about Naviru into one 30-minute slog. What a fucking nightmare. Thankfully, after this, we actually get a pretty good episode starring Cheval, who took some time to go look for his Nargacuga that he abandoned when he was edgy, and upon finding his Nargacuga, it wants nothing to do with him. Cheval shows how far he's come and is content just knowing that Nargacuga is alive when suddenly Shadow is in the forest just hunting monsters to blow off some steam. Shadow attempts to kill Cheval's Nargacuga, who flees to Cheval for help. Cheval starts fighting Shadow when, plot twist, they're twin sisters, Shadow and Grief. I think the idea of twin sisters using faster monsters to confuse their targets is pretty cool, but in retrospect, I also think this twist is kind of fucking stupid, considering that whenever we see the Ebon Riders in the Black Castle talking to Master Advis, we only ever see one sister. Would Master Advis not want to be talking to and getting updates from both of the sisters? Did Shadow convince Master Advis that Grief couldn't be present because an omniscient viewer was observing this conversation and having them both of there would ruin a twist later down the line? This is especially strange given the fact that after this reveal during Cheval's fight, both Shadow and Grief are present together when talking with Advis. They're looking past the fourth wall, we're not safe here! Anyway, Cheval goes ham and beats the fuck out of both Shadow and Grief thanks to his Rathian freezing the ground and preventing them from using their speed, which is kind of a cool solution to the fight in truth. Cheval wants to pursue them to learn the whereabouts of Avinia, but Rathian is injured and can't go, leading Nargacuga to offer to pursue them with Cheval. And, in another really sweet moment, Cheval refused to pursue them with Nargacuga either, as it was injured too. Genuinely, I like the payoff here. I like getting to see Cheval reconcile with what he did as an edgelord, and it's a pretty sweet emotional moment for him to have. Despite Cheval's 180 from edgelord to no edge, I like that the anime isn't treating all of Cheval's sins as instantly forgotten and shows the effort Cheval's putting in to make things right again. It's genuinely cool to see, and part of the reason why Cheval is the best character in the anime. Alongside Floof, anyway. Then we get some more filler episodes that are pretty whatever, though there's one that does come up later, involving Dr. Manelger. Itsy Bits requests the help of the numbers to cheer Dr. Manelger up because he's depressed or whatever, and after cheering Dr. Manelger up, he gives Naviru a pager that will let him call Dr. Manelger for help, but only once, as well as a rough map of where the Black Castle is, as Dr. Manelger had previously been studying the Ebon Riders before getting bored, and decides to help Naviru stop them because he doesn't want them gaining control of his mechanized monsters. I know I mentioned earlier how the filler episodes in this arc are what tipped me off to this being an anime original thing, but this is the point where it starts to get really grating. Jumping from the pacing of the Black Blight arc to the pacing of the Ebon Riders arc is pretty jarring, and it feels like the anime has slowed down significantly and not in a good way. There's still plenty more coming up, and the show is building up to a climactic finale against the Ebon Riders, but I can't help but feel like the show would have been better off had it ended where the games did. Speaking of that climactic buildup, we get Lute versus Gale yet again. This is where we start to learn that Gale isn't the character he seems, and is built up as somewhat of a foil for Cheval, also seeking strength to get revenge for his murdered parents. After fighting, Lute explains to Gale that Avinia doesn't know shit about a village secret and tells him to free her. In response, Gale's all like,
Slap my hand.
And then I was about to be really annoyed with the show if this is how they get Lute's kinship stone, but Gale shows us that he's more interesting than that and gives Lute his kinship stone back, to the dismay of his palate go nuts. Gale tells Lute where the Black Castle is, warns him not to show his face there, and then leaves. Huh. Naturally, Lute and the rest of the gang do show their face there, and the Ebon Riders all jump in to stop them, including Gale, but he fails to dodge a fireball from Ratha and cites his bone spurs flaring up as the reason he can't pursue them further, clearly showing off that he wants the gang to rescue Avinia. While Lute and Cheval hold off the Ebon Riders, the rest of the gang sneak into the castle, Beats commits arson, which leads to a really fucking cool shot, not gonna lie, then Avinia is saved. They grab everyone's kinship stones and bail, but not before Gale shows up and Avinia realizes that he's Avinia's older brother! I'm truly shocked. Before they get a chance to reminisce, Master Anvis shows up with his Kushala. Everyone's like, oh fuck, and they all skedaddle out of there. Okay, this section's getting way longer than I want it to be. After this reveal, there's some stupid fucking bullshit filler. Nakiri gets a Brachydios. We learn that Gale's name is... His name's fucking Michael, and we learn that the village secret Anvis is after is something called the Rite of Overlapping, which is supposed to give you tremendous power or whatever. It's also at this time that we see Nuts, Gale's Palico, rats him out to Anvis for being a traitor, and Anvis is all like, I never trusted you anyway, I only thought you'd be useful to me. It's fucking stupid, and Anvis threatens to kill the Shadow Sisters if Gale doesn't steal Lavinia's kinship stone. I'm glossing over a lot of shit here, but just know that Gale's being blackmailed, and eventually he gets Lavinia to agree to help him perform the Rite of Overlapping for Anvis, who becomes super powerful and heads out to fuck up humanity. Gale does tell Lute, however, that he didn't complete the full ritual, so he's not unstoppable, and the gang heads out to stop his evil plan. This, at long last, leads us into the final 4 episodes of the series. Anvis, first heading to Geo Fulcrite, is intercepted by her gang, and again, there are some pretty sick action shots here. The show only looks passable, like 90% of the time, but when it wants to, the show can cook. Anvis and his superpowered Kushala are too much for her gang, however, and Lute fucking dies. Oh no! He washes up on shore and awakes to Geo Fulcrite's destruction. The gang informs him that Anvis is now headed for the capital, Gildegron, and our protagonists rush over there for the final confrontation. We get a pretty cool scene of Simone calling an emergency meeting and discussing how the fuck they defeat a Kushala before all the Hakum riders show up to offer their assistance. This is a pretty cool moment of Hunter and Ryder coming together to defend the city, and would have had a lot more fucking payoff if there was actually any tension between Hunters and Riders whatsoever. You know, like they said there would be 2 episodes into the fucking anime and then never touched on ever again. It's like watching the Everyone's Here trailer for Smash Ultimate without ever having played a Nintendo game. The weight of the occasion is lost on the viewer. Regardless, they all gather together and develop a plan of using poison smoke bombs, ballista, and the riders to put a stop to Anvis. Anvis arrives and everyone starts going ham. I have to be honest, up until this point, Anvis hasn't been that compelling of a villain, but here, he shows that he's not fucking messing around. There's a scene of him grabbing Lute by the throat and throwing him into Kushala's windbreath to kill him, forcing Cheval to rush in and take the hit instead. I like how cold and aggressive he is.
You do need that edge guard, and I think you should take me seriously, because look at the scoreboard now.
Yeah, I got numbers on the...
Oh! Yo, did he just walk up slowly and down smash?
We also briefly observe Anvis's kinship stone turning bloody for a second, and his control of Kushala momentarily slipping every once in a while, which Gale explains is the result of the incomplete Rite of Overlapping, wherein forcing Anvis to fight seriously will force him to drop his guard, which is a cute little gimmick for the fight. Things start to look dire, however, but the numbers recall that Dr. Manelger gave them that funny remote where they can call him to request for help. I'm glad that they didn't just immediately forget about this. At least there's some payoff for dealing with that shitty fucking epic... Is that a fucking donut shroom? No. No. You mustn't. I beg of you. Why? Of all the callbacks to make for this hype finale, why? Dear Lord, why? Why Naviru's great fart plan? Have I not suffered enough already? Naviru is the worst fucking character ever written. I hate him with every fiber of my being. At least the suffering is brief, and we see Nakiri land a shot with his Brachydios thanks to Naviru's Geneva Convention violation. With this opening, Gale rushes in and performs the Rite of Reversal to undo the Rite of Overlapping, but since Gale himself is filled with so much anger over the fact that Anvis was the guy who decimated his village, he becomes edgy instead. This kind of sucks, not gonna lie. Lute and everyone else is able to purify Gale through the power of song, and he returns to his normal self, saving Gildegron and ending the Ebon Riders arc. A quick side note here before I summarize everything. In the final episode of the anime, before our protagonists begin tying up loose ends, there's a quick action scene between Lute, Cheval, Mad, and Wrath, and it's unironically the most dynamic and amazing animation this entire show has done thus far. Mad quickly stops the fighting, I imagine because the budgetary constraint was simply too much, but this also gives a pretty telling glimpse into what the show could have been. And this honestly makes me pretty sad that due to budgetary restrictions and needing to meet deadlines, the rest of the show wasn't able to look like this. It's a telling sign that Monster Hunter Stories Ride On is a troubled anime. It's far from flawless and suffers a lot from jarring pacing, annoying and one-note characters, limited character development, the numbers, and also Naviru specifically. Despite all of this, it really did have its moments. There's a lot of charm and depth to characters like Cheval and Gale, as well as scenes and plot points, even in the anime original Ebon Riders arc, that work well and keep the viewer invested in the world of Monster Hunter Stories. As someone who hasn't actually played the first game, I feel like the anime does a pretty good job of exploring and going through Lute's journey to end the Black Blight. The story itself isn't anything special, but I think it's told pretty well overall. In conclusion, I think the anime's fine. It's far from perfect, and not something I think I would recommend to everybody, but if you want something to watch and are willing to put up with its many failings, I think there's some genuinely pretty cool moments that Monster Hunter Stories Ride On has in store for you. And for that, I think this show gets a C on the tier list, above Orage, but no higher for me. Okay, look, I watched the shit when it came out in theaters, like in 2020. I'll be honest, I couldn't bring myself to watch it again. It's not good. You know it's not good. It's bad. Don't watch it. After the upsetting experience that is the Monster Hunter movie, would it shock you to learn that there's actually another Monster Hunter movie? Well, it's more like a short film. This is Monster Hunter Legends of the Guild, an hour-long animated movie directed by Steve Yamamoto and produced by David Coleman for Netflix. I'd heard about this movie back when it released in 2021, but I dropped my Netflix subscription about a year prior after they canceled Peak, so I never actually got around to watching it until the making of this video, so let's see if it was worth it. Monster Hunter Legends of the Guild is a story focused on Aiden, also known as the Ace Cadet from MH4U, and their origin story of becoming a hunter after meeting Julius, the ace hunter assigned by the guild to warn the local area of the Elder Dragon crossing that's threatening to destroy every village in its path. Right off the bat, the animation, voice acting, and pacing leaves a lot to be desired. These early scenes, and the rest of the movie for that fact, leaves you in a constant state of whiplash, bouncing between scenes and lines like some brain rot YouTube short to keep you watching. The voice acting itself also feels very flat, with the only notable performance for me being GK Bose playing Nadia, who I actually felt like delivered her lines pretty okay for the most part. To be clear, I don't think the voice acting talent is bad or anything. Like, they got Dante Basco, fucking Zuko, to voice Aiden. Everyone on board is pretty fucking talented. I think it's more a consequence of the movie's attempt to fit a bunch of narrative information into a 1-hour runtime, which is no doubt the source of this awful pacing and performance. I'm not sure what happened in production that led to this, but I feel like the direction of the movie needed to take its limited runtime into consideration more when developing its scenes. As for the animation, I mean, you've been looking at it. It's like CG puppet animation. It just doesn't look appealing. It's like everyone's moving on wires. This breakneck pacing also serves the function of ruining some pretty interesting conversations, like when Aiden is asking Julius about why the guild gets to decide what and how people hunt, only for the show to deliver a one-sentence answer before moving on to the next thing. Like, there are some interesting questions in world building that's trying to be established, but because the show constantly demands we march forwards, we don't get to stop and think. Also, as a side note, Jesus Christ, the jokes in the show do not land for me. I know that comedy is subjective, and I'm also aware that Aiden's stupid puns come from the games, but they really do force it down your throat here, and it really doesn't help that the voice actors were given no direction on how to pronounce any of the monsters' names, like Nurskilla,
Stinger,
Bunahabra.
Bring out those Bunahabra.
These pronunciations are like cheese graters on my ears. I refuse to believe these are canon. And, as a matter of fact, there's proof within this that proves that Monster Hunter Legends of the Guild is non-canon. Check this out.
It is Alatray on!
On the surface, this may just seem like another stupid fucking pun, with Aiden saying that it's Alatray on once Julius agrees to help hunt the Lunastra that's about to fuck up the village. However, presenting our first piece of evidence, the opening shot of the movie, we see that the present-day Aiden is on his way to the New World aboard a vessel of the 5th Fleet, with the runtime of this movie being a story that Aiden is telling the others about his encounter with his first Elder Dragon, Lunastra. I'll repeat myself for the jury, his first Elder Dragon. Now, if you'll recall correctly from Monster Hunter World Iceborne, following the release of Alatreon, we're informed by the tracker that all records of Alatreon were burned by people fearful of its existence, tying into the lore of black dragons being historically mysterious and largely unknown entities even within the Elder Dragon classification. It's also important to note that Alatreon is only known to reside in 2 places, the Sacred Land and the Secluded Valley. This is our second piece of evidence. Our final piece of evidence is a bit earlier in the show, when we learn that Aiden, despite hunting to defend his village, is not registered with the guild, and judging by his reaction to meeting Julius, doesn't often interact with hunters at large. With this foundation in place, I'm willing to put forward the argument that there is no reasonable explanation for how Aiden could possibly know about the existence of Alatreon. Not only has Aiden not left his village, and thus would not have the opportunity to come across the Sacred Land or Secluded Valley, Aiden himself admits that Lunastra was his first Elder Dragon, suggesting that when this pun was made, Aiden had not encountered any Elder Dragon prior, including Alatreon. Without the status of a guild-registered hunter, there's no reason for limited information related to the existence of a black dragon who, and I quote, uttering its name causes panic, to be provided to Aiden under any circumstance, whether by another hunter, Wyverian, or the guild itself. Therefore, a reasonable person would have to conclude that Aiden is making puns beyond his current level of knowledge, which jeopardizes the canon of the show and proves that Monster Hunter Legends of the Guild is a non-canon adaptation, and also stinky. Anyway, yeah, the rest of the show still sucks. Aiden and Julius meet May and Nadia after Julius fires a flare for help, and then together, with the help of this random blacksmith Ravi, who apparently has a history of poaching, they all work together to stop Lunastra. Okay, serious question, and I'm sorry. Why did the show take the time to establish that the only other black character outside of Nadia in this entire movie has a criminal background? The pace has been breakneck this entire fucking time, but this is important world building. Whatever. It's a shame they spent the time building up Ravi's lore too, because he gets fucking atomized by Lunastra like 2 seconds later. Like, there's nothing left to bury. Then they try to do this emotional scene where Julius declares that Ravi's dead, but because the show's been moving so fast, it's physically impossible to be attached to any of these characters. May, the insect glaive lady, somehow dies too. The movie doesn't really show anything, and I didn't process that they died initially, and they have this whole funeral and everything, and there's just no weight to it at all. If nothing else, this whole movie serves as a cautionary tale on the importance of character establishment, because good God, I do not care about any of these characters. The awful pacing of the movie constantly marching forwards didn't set enough time on the itinerary for making these characters likable or fleshed out, and if the movie doesn't care enough to establish its characters, the viewer's not going to care when they're in danger or die. Aiden eventually flushes Lunastra down the turlet and, saves his village, only to request that he join Julius and Nadia to become an ace cadet. The end. If it wasn't clear enough throughout my analysis of this, I fucking hated the movie. The pacing, acting, animation, and story is jarring and underdeveloped. There's no tension or weight to the conflicts our characters find themselves in because the movie couldn't be bothered to establish or develop any of them. They're all one note, and I literally had to look up their names multiple times when writing this section because I kept forgetting. Genuinely, I think the failure of this movie is kind of a shame. There are a lot of people who really like the Ace Hunter some image for you, myself included. I think getting to see Aiden's origin story as we follow him between games could have been really good, but the poor execution leaves a really poor taste in my mouth. At the very least, it's objectively non-canon, and I will not take questions on the matter. Monster Hunter Legends of the Guild gets a D for don't renew your Netflix subscription for this. Alright, that's it. That's all the Monster Hunter adaptations that I went through. Overall, they're kind of mid, huh? There were definitely some shining gems in there, and I think that when done right, these adaptations are a really cool way of expanding the Monster Hunter universe and giving us more bite-sized and personalized stories in a way that the game seems to struggle with. I've only just scratched the surface with these adaptations too. There are more manga and light novels that I wanted to get to, but for the sake of getting something out sooner rather than later, because I decided I should probably just shelve them. If you're interested in more of these adaptations, or even some of the art books and stuff, let me know and I might make a part 2. But for now, if you'll excuse me, I have some Monster Hunter likes I need to finish playing. Thanks for watching.